level? Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear?
Hello.
Matt, can you do level 6 that shit? Sorry. Alright guys, welcome to the 2014 ANUSA education debate. We're here doing two of the education officer candidates, Connor Drummond, who is independent, and Tom Knott, who's from Stand Up for Your Education. And then in lieu of Laura Wade, who's the bounce candidate, who is unable to be here today, we have Cam Wilson, who's the president-elect of this 2014. Today we've got a number of questions to test your knowledge, your aptitude, your character, and essentially your suitability for the position of education officer, and I suppose a bit of Cam's knowledge about the position. So we're going to run from easy through to very, very difficult, and I hope you all enjoy and can make your minds up at the end. Alright, question 1. This is a buzzer question. So if you just test out your name is your buzzer. So it's a buzzer. This is like a warm-up.
Okay, so I'm saying that.
Yeah.
Cam.
Alright, Cam's buzzer. Alright, all very distinguishable. Okay, question 1 is, and the first person to buzz their name wins, and after this will go opening statements. Question is, name each of the GO8 universities.
University of Melbourne, Monash University, University of Sydney, the University of New South Wales, the University of Queensland, the University of Adelaide, the University of Western Australia, and the Australian National University.
Alright, so more test knowledge. I think Tom got that one really well. So next we're going to go to opening statements from the candidates. 3 minutes just to see what you're all about, what you're doing, and what you are talking about for 2014. Cam? Yeah.
I'm Cam. I'm here instead of Laura, who is the bounce candidate for education officer. She can't be here today, unfortunately, because she's acting as the current ANUSA science rep, and she's meeting up with the Dean of Science science course reps. But if I can take a second to talk about Laura, she is a really intelligent, passionate, and hard-working individual. She's really informed on all higher education issues, and particularly those involving the ANU. And also, she just loves researching about it and finding out new solutions to the problems. Laura is a great organiser. She's a fantastic communicator, but also just a really down-to-earth and great person. I've been blessed to be able to work with her as a candidate, as a team member, but also as a person. So I really, it's been really lucky. So I guess bounce generally. We're a group of independent, diverse kids who have no political affiliations. And we've worked at this as a team, and I'm really proud of us. We've worked together and created our values, our policies, and how we're communicating those as a team. That's why we're under the same banner, because we are a group of people setting up to the same things. Our values, we think this is a really important thing, because policy inevitably is going to change depending on what happens in the year. But these are the things that you can hold us to account to. These are the things you can expect us to behave like. So we really value community, we value dialogue, we value the student lifestyle, we value professionalism and accountability, and we value accessibility and equality. These things are really important to us, and we'll see this through our policy. So when we came with our policy, we looked at things like, what are we going to say? And we decided that we were only going to say things that we thought were achievable as a whole. So things that we could do as a group, but also with the time constraints that we have, and also the energy constraints. And so we've come up with a variety of ideas, like keeping the focus of education on the debate of education, about the quality of education, and not just dollars and cents. We're talking about providing more support to clubs and societies. We're talking about electoral reform, so we're talking about a whole variety of things that we really passionately feel about. And we've already started to incorporate that policy in how we've acted. We've been consulting students, we've been around, and we're showing what we are. So I guess this debate today is about education. That's what we mainly be talking about. And I'm really excited to talk about things like the CAPS cuts. I'm excited to talk about the degrees changes, how we're going to deal with this new online education phenomenon, and also NUS delegates. But I just want to thank the guys for coming today. I really appreciate it. I think this is a debate we really need to have, and I look forward to see you guys involved next year, no matter what happens in the election. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm excited about talking about some big issues today.
time. I'm
into this bit. Oh, there we go. What a revolution. Hi, my name is Connor. I'm running as an independent candidate for the position of Education Officer for 2014. Independent on paper, it's a little bit different that I'm actually involved with the ANU Education Action Group. Fucking hell. Right. I'm the treasurer of the ANU actually. One of the guys who kind of started doing it about the middle of this year. We've already had a number of really successful things we've done. You might have seen at least reports of the occupation we did at the Dean's office passed the other day. As a direct result from that, we've got Royce and Gustav coming out with a separate CAS forum alongside the one that we've been promoting on Woroni. I suppose, I don't know, I mean, if we want to talk about values, and I believe it is important to have some sort of guiding principles that sort of outline the way we're going to approach education policy. The idea that the ANU, the problem with the ANU that we've seen so far is not consultation with themselves. They've been bad in that they almost haven't happened, but that's not the problem. The problem has been the way that these consultations are allowed to exist. The fact that the ANU could call a consultation, could have a big box they've constructed for students to tick just by turning up, and then they have all the moral weight that they want to say, well, students either A, agreed with what we said, B, didn't turn up, therefore don't care, C, are working in dialogue with us, but we're going to do this anyway. And those are just not appropriate ways to run universities. There needs to be a much higher level of cultivated and a much higher level of both staff and student influence on the way the courses are dealt with and constructed. And that's one of the things that I'm really going to be trying to talk about for the next year is pushing this forward, trying to change the processes that are already in place, because there are councils on which students sit, but they're obviously not working in any way in our favour. CAS is going to have tutorials and years on if we don't do something about that soon.
Like this, I mean, there's nothing else I can do.
Aside from that, I suppose I just want to make the point that I have been around ANUSA for a while. I mean, not really in an official capacity, but I do tend to turn up to the meetings, you know. I do tend to turn up to education committee sort of unannounced. And I've got a little bit of experience on how to get these things moving along. And I've got, I don't know, I suppose, very quiet but very deep anger about the way that education is being treated. And I suppose I think that is, I mean, along with one of the insight, the big thing that I would want to see in the education officer is like being totally unassailably angry about the way that this is going. And I think that's what I want.
Speaking to me. Oh, that's not that. Actually, I don't like it. Anyway. I don't know. My name's Tom. I'm a third-year arts and economics student. I firmly believe that we take our education here at ANU very much for granted. I first realised this at the beginning of this year when I walked into my Australian Foreign Policy tutorial, and there was already 20 people in the room. There were people sitting on the floor, there weren't enough desks or chairs, and it was just a travesty. It was not a very conducive educational environment, but it was, I got to say, now that I look back on it and what's been happening recently, it's better than nothing at all. I started talking with some other people and we formed this little group that we have, Stand Up For Your Education. And we started floating around ideas about how we want education to be treated at ANU, and we came up with 3 core principles about how to promote education and also how to consolidate what we already have. And those principles are quality, equity, and practicality. We need to come up with policies that actually have outcomes, and we need to make sure that we do get the education that we signed up for when we came here. Our group is very committed to practical solutions and practical outcomes. We have a whole range of experience. Everyone in our group has been involved in educational activism in some way or another, and we're all very passionate about education here at ANU. In regards to our policies, our principal policy will be to show the university what we value, and hopefully they respond appropriately to that. We want to run a very comprehensive tutorials campaign, stopping the tutorial cuts campaign, and we also have other ideas around international students. With a lot of the conversations that we've had with international students, they feel more like a commodity at this university rather than actual students, so we want to get that changed. We also want to stop illegal course fees, and we want to reduce the additional cost that students face to pursue an education. The principal area in that is textbooks, and we actually have firm action items to make sure that we can lobby at all levels of government and here at ANU to make sure that those costs come down. So we have a well-rounded policy, everything is coupled with action items, there are things that we can do, and we really look forward to be able to help in whatever capacity next year. And so if you like the ideas that I just said, then I encourage you to get involved as well. Thanks.
It's your first class of the semester, and your lecturer discloses that her head of school has just announced the abolition of part-time teaching budget for undergraduate courses. Give us a plan of action to deliver the best outcome for students, including strategies you would use to deal with senior years of university management if you are stonewalled. I think we've got Connor first.
Okay.
Well, if I turned up to my first lecture, my lecturer would say, congratulations, the part-time teaching budget has been removed. There is no part-time teaching budget, there will be no, well, probably there will be. I mean, I can't.
Sorry, technical issues. We tried.
There we go. Wonderful. If I had turned up to my first lecture of the year and the lecturer had said to me that there was no part-time teaching budget, I would first go back to the EAG, frankly, because it's essentially the stuff that, at least in the last month or so, we've been talking about almost exclusively, is how to deal with the issue of tutorial cuts.
Connor, can you just explain what the EAG is?
Oh, okay. So the EAG, the Education Action Group at the ANU, is just a bunch of students who are sort of running parallel to the Education Committee, doing what activism we can. We're kind of less constrained than the Education Committee in some ways, which gives us like the power to call strikes, to call strike is a last resort, obviously, but to call rallies, to like have a walkthrough, have stalls where we hand out propaganda and stuff like that. It's just sort of like a complementary organisation where we have slightly less power, I suppose, but we're more able to exercise it. Anyway, so I would go back to the EAG, and I would also, I suppose, refer to the ways that we've been talking about it recently, which are to state that we don't say hands-off tutorials. That's like a real easy answer, and it's also not taking into account what lecturers themselves might be thinking. Our position is essentially that lecturers should be supported financially and organisationally, and frankly, without bullying, which has been going on a lot, to provide the education that they feel is good for the course they're teaching, that they feel is good for the students who are going to be there to attend the course, and to do that, we'd be probably doing rallies, doing occupations. Alongside that, we'd also be, I suppose, if I'm an education officer, engaging with the university at management levels, trying to do some of the lobbying stuff that ANUSA is much more able to do than we are. If we're totally stonewalled, then I suppose the answer always has to be that they have the power to do that. What they don't have the power to do is to stop students walking around and being very vocal and very angry. And so it's the first option and it's the last option. It's not the best one, but it does work. And that's what I think.
So if I walked into the lecture and my lecturer told me there's no part-time teaching budget, there will be no tutorials this semester, come to a forum after the lecture and we can have a nice discussion with 300 other people, I'd be pretty annoyed. Firstly, I think you need to recognise, you need to get the reasons of why they're doing it. Why is this lecturer, has she or he even decided to make this decision by themselves? Have they been pressured by the college? Have they been, so you need to ascertain the reasons why the part-time teaching budget has been cut for this particular course. Once you have those reasons, you then need to look at other areas that you could exploit. One thing that ANU does have that is very precious to it is its reputation. ANU would not want to see students failing at its university, and as Connor has said, you can do that in numerous ways. You don't just have to stand out in your court and protest. You can do it in various ways, such as letter writing to newspaper, intense campaigns on tutorials and education, and you really do need to kind of get the message out there that there is really no other way that you can teach the course if you don't have a part-time teaching budget. So you need to work very methodically, and if you're stonewalled by the university administration, that's when you start going for the reputation. And you can even go as far as telling other students who may be thinking about going to ANU, don't come here because you won't get taught anything pretty much. So you do need to work. You need to start small and then go big. You need to be smart about it, and you need to use all the resources that are at your disposal, including consultations and student wellness.
Cool.
That was me, sorry.
Okay, so firstly, I'm going to be a dickhead and reject the question and say that you shouldn't be finding out about the cuts to the part-time teaching budget in a lecture. Part of our job is finding out all that stuff before. That's why we as a ticket have fact reps, that kind of thing. Firstly, it shouldn't happen that way.
Alright, the question is, what would you do when you found out that your lecturer discloses that the head of schools just announced the abolition of the part-time teaching budget for undergraduate courses?
Yep, okay, sorry, I just got to real world. So hypothetically I find it out that way. Look, I think what a lot of the guys have covered so far has been great. I mean, let's be honest, we have to work with the university and there's a lot of ways to do that, and I think it's too simple to say, hey, we need to work with the administration, because there's a lot of levels with administration. So let's take this real world example that's going on right now. At the moment, the Chancellery, so that is the higher overall administration, is kind of distancing themselves from these cuts. CAS has made, in fact, the School of Politics and IR made this cut, and it's being managed by CAS, and that's been, and the Chancellery is distancing themselves from it. So first of all, we need to realise who's responsible for it and work within that. It's not as simple as just being like ANU is against us. Then the next step is how can we work with them, and there's a whole variety of ways which the guys have already covered. And then yeah, if they do stonewall us, then there are things we can do. I'm looking forward to next year working with Woroni, for instance. I'm looking forward to getting information out there ourselves, like the motion that was passed yesterday about getting more information out there about changes to degrees, that kind of thing. One of our goals this afternoon is to go, let's get the information out there to students and so to get their action. Let's work with people like the Camera Times. So yeah, I think there's a whole variety of ways, and I agree with what that has been said.
Okay. I just want to quickly go through what you said there, Cam. The idea that you could just reject this scenario because, like, well, they're supposed to know about it already. I mean, like, yes, that's correct. You are supposed, like, ANUSA is supposed to know about this stuff before it's announced. It's supposed to be able to pick this stuff up and everything before it comes out in paper form. But I mean, the fact is that the current administration wasn't able to do that, and there aren't really any other administrations throughout history being able to do that either. And so, I mean, like, unless you reckon you've got fucking amazing gen reps, like, I don't know, man, maybe you guys are really good, but like, all I'm saying is that historically there is attrition with gen reps. There is attrition with the amount of time that faculty reps can give to the role that they've been given. And that's not their fault. I'm not saying it is their fault. I'm not saying it's anything to do with them as people, but I am saying that, like, that's what always happens. So I don't think it's maybe helpful to start with the assumption that you're just going to be able to be, like, better at it than every other organisation has been.
Sorry, just quickly for that reply. Yeah, I agree it's hard to pick up, and this current situation which is going on has been not optimal, but then you hold into account that you're good.
We've just got a question from the crowd.
What tactics do you have to get information out to students?
Yeah, great question. So this year, I think that's been one of the things that ANUSA is really working on, and I'm really excited that ANUSA has a communications officer. I think that's a really big step towards making sure this is consistent out there. Like I said, we have a policy for ANUSA blog, and I'm looking forward to thinking about new ways as well.
Alright, on to the next question. What do you see as the most immediate threats to student welfare and education under an incoming Abbott government, and how would you address such threats in your roles? So this will be a question from two education officer candidates and Cam as president. We'll start with Cam.
Can you just repeat that question?
Sorry. What do you see as the most immediate threats to student welfare and education under an incoming Abbott government, and how would you address such threats?
Okay, so if there is an Abbott government, it's very likely that there's going to be further cuts to the higher education sector. It's also historically it's looking like they would get rid of the student services and amenities fee, that $263 you pay every year. And frankly, I think they're really important things. Obviously, they're both really important things to the university. I don't need to explain why we need to have adequate funding to the higher education sector, but SAP particularly I think is extremely important to the extracurricular life of this campus and all the facilities and services we have. That's something that is in our NUS policy that we really want to fight for. Our three NUS policies are we want to fight for more funding for higher education, fight for the right to have SAP, and also better communications between offices and collectives. So yeah, that's just one step we take. We engage with NUS, which I think is a really big thing, that would be particularly important next year.
How would you address such things?
Okay, well then I guess the thing is, honestly, like, you just have to engage in NUS in something that is such a big issue, because this is a federal issue.
Well, I suppose the biggest threats that I perceive coming out of the Abbott government would be also on the understanding that if Abbott is in as the head of the coalition, then the coalition will be in power for at least 2 terms. So it's not just a question of, like, well, these 3 years are coming, we better weather this storm. It's actually going to be a longer term gain on that. And in that space of time, I see, well, to start with, yes, there would be probably, like, even the removal of the student service and amenities fee, trying to get VSU back in, which is a thing that Abbott was a big fan of back in the day. same time, there's also probably going to be stuff like dealing with the increased number of places at universities by increasing the fees that universities pay for the new places at universities. It's not just going to be for international students, it's going to be for domestic students as well. That's going to be a long-term process, and it's also, I don't know, like, I suppose one of the interesting things about ABIC is that it draws a lot of the political tactics that he uses, and there's sort of his understanding of the way that things should kind of run from American conservative politics. And American conservative politics is also bound up with their universities, which is essentially one where the universities are astronomically expensive and you have to take out loans to get there. And I'm not saying that's going to arrive in like the first 6 months of our prime ministership if he gets elected, but it's something that it's sort of the direction in which you can move in. So understanding that anything that Abbott does is also in the context of not just cutting staff, but also making it very difficult to, like, even pay. Thank you. As far as combating that, I suppose, NUS would be a very important organisation to be in contact with. Hopefully, we would have an NUS that would be energised enough to react in any way, which is not always the case. Also, I suppose, I don't know, I mean, just local level protests. There's stuff that, like, NUS is very good for, coordinating national campaigns, trying to get in the rooms with, like, I don't know, members of parliament in, like, the cities where the universities are. NUS is essentially something for Sydney and Melbourne, really, is where most of the seats in the US come from. At the same time, I'd say that you can't just devalue local actions like, I suppose, protests, can't devalue things like small protests, you can't devalue letter writing, as Anne and Tom had mentioned. You can't devalue just like expressing how very annoyed you are with this in a number of ways that aren't always even under my control as education officers. Just people around the university being able to talk to each other about this, I think is very important. And that's one of the things that I've been trying to facilitate, is an environment in which people feel like they can both talk about this and come up with solutions by themselves.
Last time the Libs got in 1996, universities were completely gutted. The like-minded universities when the Australian campus, and those were kind of like your garden variety Liberal parties. These guys are about to come in now. They are much more hardcore, much more right-wing, and much more willing to cut and not think about what they're cutting. So we're about to see something that I don't think any of us are expecting, even with the predictions that there will be an Abbott government this time next month. So we're going to have to be really smart in the way that we tackle that kind of thing. We're going to have to align a lot of our education policies with the National Union of Students, and the National Union of Students needs to get a lot smarter in how they tackle government, because people that have been working with NUS now, they've been working with the Labor government for relatively sympathetic Labor government for about since 2007. So no one really knows how to handle what will eventually happen. But what the NUS needs to do is they need to get much smarter about action. They need to focus a lot more attention on specific campaigns. They need to put all their energy into campaigns that really do show the nation that we want to have our education appropriately funded, and that we won't accept any kind of austerity-esque cuts. So yeah, we need to become a lot smarter in how we advocate for our education, and we need to be a lot more aware of just what they will do with education and what we can do about it.
Thank you, Tom.
We're going to take 2 more questions after the panel, and then we're going to leave it open to our social media questioners and also people in the crowd. So if you have a question, start thinking about it, and we'll get you to come up and talk soon. Also, if you want to make a Twitter handle, now's the time. So, education activism is full of a wide array of personalities and opinions. In the past, what has been your most effective method of organising groups of people who have very different ideas about how things should be done? Tom?
By far, the most effective measure I think you can bring to people, to a wide range of people, is awareness. Once people have a common understanding of the problem that they're facing, they are much more likely to work with you to try to fix that problem. Awareness is the key to activism. I said this yesterday at the OGM, and that is something that ANU and ANUSA desperately need more of. We need to start getting out there and telling people what is happening to their education. We can't expect students to come up to us and ask us what is happening. We need to tell them. We've come up with a variety of ways to heighten the level of awareness. One of them is something which has been tried at a couple of universities before, it's never really been tried anything new, is combining partying and awareness campaigns. I don't know if you could have a stop the tube STEM party and use it, and be a lot more clever than that. But it's something that we have discussed and something that we think would work and has worked at different universities. So yeah, awareness really is the key to overcoming personality clashes as well. You need to effectively communicate what you're on about, what you want, and you need to find common areas where priorities and motivations overlap.
The question is that education activism is full of a wide array of personalities and opinions. In the past, what has been your most effective method of organising groups of people who have very different ideas about how things should be done?
Okay, well, I suppose in terms of organising groups of people with different ideas, my experience has largely been on the left, really, where the arguments tend to come up basically just like people not getting quite what they want, so they make ridiculous demands and then they storm out and form a splinter organisation, which is, I'm sure many people have seen this happen. It's very, very unpleasant and in no way useful. I think one of the interesting things about the education action group this year, I'm sorry to come back to this, but I think it was very interesting as a test case for how this stuff would run, is that there's been a number of people from the Fenner School, for instance, who have a specific things like the education arts and campaigns ways that you were talking about, broadly anarchistic ways of making because we've got like a couple of people who do really consider themselves trots in the room. We've got a couple of people who are just like pretty annoyed about shoots being cut, don't have sort of like a well-formed knife-edge definition of who they are politically. So there is a wide range of views in that particular, and yet we've been able to basically just sit down and talk this stuff through. I mean, in terms of getting a broad student base to support you, yes, there is awareness which is extremely important, but I mean, like, I don't actually think it's that difficult to make the argument for students that like, cuts control is bad. I don't think that that's really a problem in terms of overcoming people's opposition ideologically. I think the big issue that comes out of the context of people sort of having arguments over policy, people having arguments over how they want to do things, tends to be people in rooms when they're planning actions, you know? Honestly, it sounds real lame, but just talking it through and making the points again and again until you reach something like a consensus helps. It's very important and it's worked for us so far, and we've had one of the extremely successful actions like that.
So again, we've got these guys have touched on things that I completely agree with. One thing, I guess, how do you get this kind of awareness? How do you get past the different opinions and personalities? Well, I think the really simple way is, sorry, it's easier said than done, but what you simply have to do is connect to the variety of networks that already exist in ANU. Let's look at what we already have. We already have a students association which has a variety of people from different backgrounds who connect with people. We already have like 110 clubs and societies who many of them have academic focuses. We have learning communities throughout the university who we can connect to. These are groups of people who are already interested in stuff that we can very easily mobilise. So I guess for me, a great rally that we had was against the school music clubs. And I'm questioning like, why was it so successful? And part of the reasons that I thought it was successful is because although the clubs weren't affecting a lot of people, it showed to people, it showed to students broadly that this issue was a big issue. Because I'm just going to be stereotypical here. A lot of the school music people have been traditionally uninvolved with a lot of the rest of going on campus. But this was a time where they really got up and were active about it. And the effect of this was showing that this cause wasn't just one group of people being like, this is a bad thing. This is something that affects students broadly. This has made some students who don't give a shit, sorry my language, about this stuff usually stepping up because it's reached that point. That's what you have to do. You have to make the cause not just the EIG, which is amazing. You have to make it more than just one faculty. You've got to make it about the students generally and show that it can affect them. That even if this one isn't, the next one could definitely be about them. So use those communities that already exist, make it bigger than one group of students.
Quickly respond to the chance comment again. Maybe I was unclear. I'm not saying that the EAG is the be-all and end-all of education active. However, I would also argue that a couple of times in the past people have tried to reach out to clubs, societies, learning communities on campus. I suppose one of the problems that comes with that sort of stuff is that often these communities, these clubs and societies have extremely specific interests. The individuals in those communities might be like able to respond to like the arguments that you're putting forward very fruitfully, but arguing to them as like this is the group and we would like you as the group to come along with us and do this thing. I don't know, sometimes it gets on the nerves of people in clubs and societies I found when they try to interact in that way. It feels like you're trying to politicise like the Harry Potter Club, you know? It's just like not popular. And so while yes, there is definitely merit in reaching out to clubs and societies and previously established organisations and systems and networks, at the same time I'd say that it's extremely difficult and by all means make an attempt, but at the same time I'd say that it's much more simple to argue people on a person-to-person basis, and that requires maybe larger numbers of people doing the actual argumentation, but at the same time you're much less likely to annoy the actual audience to try and improve.
Yep, I agree with that. I didn't mean it as a slight against EIG. I think it's a great group that's been active about a lot of things. And about your point about how you might annoy people, that's why you have to be specific when you talk to people. You can't just be like, this is a cause, you've got to make it relevant to them. But yeah, I agree with what you say, it is a difficult task.
My words of advice from an experienced education campaigner. Now, one question I think from the bench. Do we have any questions from the crowd? Anybody to start asking questions? Alright, from the critical thinking. Alright, chuck you on a list. Can you wait 1 minute? Thanks. Okay, the last question we're going to have up here is, what is your position concerning cross-institutional work on education issues? This is something that has come up year after year after year, and people have tried to coordinate campaigns between ANU, UC, CIT, ACU, Canberra-wide, ACT-wide, ACT New South Wales-wide campaigns. A lot of the stuff that we've seen recently is on internal education policy, which is in fact under the mandate, I believe, of the Vice President of ANUSA, whereas the education officer is about external education policy. Do you have any plans, what are your thoughts on cross-institutional work on education issues, and have you any plans to launch or reignite any ACT-wide campaigns in 2014? We'll go to Cam first.
Sure, okay. So the education officer, as AJ said, is primarily involved with the external thing. Minor Use Warrington has hinted towards there being more involvement between the universities. So for instance, like we don't offer a journalism course, and so there was talk of having a joint degree between journalism at UC and something at ANU. So I think that is something, well, we have a lot of combined interests that are really appropriate. Specifically for, I guess, cuts generally, I mean, I can't see an indication whether it be just ACT specific cuts, but I mean, there's probably some merit in running ACT campaigns. Yeah, so yeah, I'm going to take it to comments.
Okay, so I suppose a bunch of you guys might be aware of the fact that the UC, for instance, earlier this year cut a bunch of the language courses in Poland. A bunch of those students now at the ANU kind of noted by Facebook. I've been talking to them a little bit, trying to get interested in doing a bit of work around like cross campuses at ANU-UC. I suppose one of the things about trying to get in on that endeavour, trying to get UC students to form some sort of like solid plan for the ANU in terms of resisting cuts to education, is that the UC Student Association is like really useless, so. And I'm not going to beat about that bullshit, they're pathetic. But at the same time, I suppose the interesting thing about maybe it's just come up to me recently, the fact that all of these people from the UC, I just keep seeing them around campus now, you know? And like, not too hard to just have a conversation with them. And it's not too hard to try and get those people to tell you about some of the things we're still in the UC, you know? Try and build up very slowly, sort of on a very personal level, even just a group of maybe like 16 or 17 people, which is like really a huge number of people if they're committed to actually doing an education activity. One of the secrets is that you don't need heaps of people involved, like directly. It's like, yes, you need lots of people at rallies, yes, you need lots of people writing the letters, yes, you need lots of people turning up to forums. But actually, in terms of organisation, you just don't need that many people. You can get a solid base of people across a number of institutions, then it becomes actually not difficult to organise this kind of thing. Of course, the solidity of that is in question as well, and continuing to those contacts is like also very important to maintain. But I'll be doing that. Yeah. I suppose with regards to other stuff like the CIT, which I know has had a huge range of things play out recently. It's not strictly tertiary education, the ACT, but like it is for our students. And it's extremely important, and that's a different kettle of fish in some ways. The students there are just like, they just aren't really similar to ANU or UC students. They're just like all three of these groups are very different in many ways. And like, it's not to put anything on anybody, it's just like, they both like have specific concerns that maybe I just don't share them. And maybe I just like find it difficult to run into people in social situations, that kind of thing. However, it's definitely worthwhile trying to reach out to these people, especially as in the case of the CIT, for instance. A lot of people who enroll in courses there are actually just like later life professionals, you know? Yep. So the potential benefits from getting these people on site is not just that you have students who are learning, but you have like actual people in the camera times who are fucking coming along to the protests off their own back, which is like a big difference. As regards national stuff, well, I mean, like as Tom has raised, there is a real big question over how NUS is going to be able to deal with getting incoming host government, and so there's going to be like a lot of problems there, and that's going to take a lot of talking over. But I do probably think that NUS has definitely a role to play, but I would certainly look forward to maintaining the contacts that have been established with the ANU specifically, actually, over the last year.
Yeah, I think Ira and Pat both made some really good points in regards to this question. You want to keep in mind that there is a substantial amount of overlap between institutions at the moment, and mention one of the courses that also used to exist. I think it still exists, but in a lesser form at the moment. Education music degree at ANU, that's cross-institutional between ANU and the University of Canberra. And also one of my very good friends studies at UC, but he's doing languages here, as Connor said, that part of the language courses at UC. So there is quite a lot of opportunity for crossover in priorities and crossover in motivations to make some actions. Another thing to keep in mind is that the ANU is a lot more sensitive to movements in federal funding to higher education than a lot of other universities are, because we get our funding exclusively from the federal government. UC gets a substantial amount of money from the ACT government at the moment, so much so that they're getting a brand shiny new hospital on their campus. So I think there's a lot of leverage there that you can use and a lot of discussion points that you can bring up with other executives at other student associations. We've been going back to NUS a lot, but I think that is a very good body to coordinate a lot of these policies in. And I think that the students all have a really common goal, and that is to get the best quality education possible. And if we keep that in mind, there is quite a lot of opportunity to be able to team up and go along to process and create actions that will really bring the attention of people around. And I think that with what's going to happen, we're going to need to do more of that. So I really agree with what Cameron Connery said so far. And
these last couple of questions to 1 minute because we are running out of time. But as you are talking about NUS, NUS is the National Union of Students, so you may not know or may not. Not a lot of people do. Essentially, NUS is really fabulous. It's coming from an old education officer, Tom Barrington-Smith, from 2012. NUS is really great at disseminating information and coordinating on political campaigns. It is effing useless, however, in non-political things, and when you're trying to get things done when you have different political affiliations to those of people in the national executive. How will you, as education officers and ANUSA executive members, deal with any political discord that you have with the national executive of NUS if you have to deal with them on such a regular basis?
Hi Tom. I suppose I actually kind of take I'm not totally on side with one of the premises of the question, which is that the NUS is really good at disseminating information. Yes, they've got like really good channels for getting posters out to everybody, but they're usually posters that are just like really bland and just don't actually make any useful points at all. And so like they can get out propaganda real fine. So congratulations NUS on that one. But in terms of information dissemination, it's like a different question. I don't think they're very good at it actually. Further to that, I suppose, being on my 1 minute question answer. Yeah, so dealing with NUS, I would just like try and talk to them as much as I can. As I said before, the NUS is actually concentrating a lot on the ANU this year specifically, there's like real good links that are coming up between the NUS education officer and the education officer of the ANU. The same thing with the NUS president and the ANU's president. Student association. I don't think there's like actually a huge risk of a great big schism. So I don't really know if the question is sort of addressing the right point.
Sorry, could you just repeat the question?
It's a long one. Okay, how will you deal with any issues that you may have with it?
A lot of people don't recognise a lot of the stuff that NUS has done in recent years. The probably most important thing that they've done in the last half decade or so is advocate successfully to get SACA. I think that has been one of the biggest triumphs that NUS has had, and it's not talked about at all. They're running a very intense fair fares campaign in order to get concessions for students all over the country. So I think that NUS is effective. In regards to how I would deal with political differences, look, at the end of the day, we're all students and we're all after the same thing. the way we get it, I think, is something that we need to talk through. As Connor said, ANU has received a lot of attention from the ANUS executive this year, and that is a really, really good thing. We're building really, really good links with Education Officer at ANUS and also the President. So I think that, I think that it's actually pretty unlikely for politics to get in the way of really constructive work that we could do with ANUS.
So we're taking a different approach to NUS delegates this year. We're just really focusing on what NUS can do for ANU specifically. Because frankly, for those of you who don't know, we have 5 delegates compared to a lot of the other universities, such as Monash, which has 20 or maybe more. So we don't have a lot of political sway. So what we're trying to do is, I guess, maximise what we can get out of it. And our delegates have proudly said that they're going to be independent and not sit in any faction. I don't know what the other candidates are doing, but we accept that that means we potentially won't have a lot of political sway. But we're just really going to, I guess, focus on what we can get out of it. So as I mentioned before, one of our main policies in the NUS is keeping the executive accountable to, the NUS executive accountable to how they're communicating with our officers. So for instance, I know that the Women's Department hasn't heard from the Women's Officer of NUS this year, which is, frankly, it's unacceptable. We really want to hold them to account. We want to get these connections going and get the most from them. So I guess dealing with the politics, I think we're going to be, frankly, we're too insignificant to be involved in that, and I don't think it's an issue for us. And yeah, lots of correspondence with the executive, like I know that Jay, the president of NUS this year, has had with our executive.
Alright, thank you. We have a question from the crowd, no doubt.
I can just yeah. So I know that none of you are on ANUSA this year, but by the same token, I don't think you should need a formal position to show your passion for education. So I was just wondering what you've all done in your individual capacities against like the devastating cuts we've seen this year and last year. Cam, since you're already elected, I don't know if you can say what Laura's done or
So the question was, what have you done in your individual capacity against the devastating cuts that have happened this year and last year to ANU courses?
Trying to drop some sample
So just going back to this question, I was a general representative in 2012 and I also represented, I think I was the only NUS delegate to go to the National Union of Students Congress that was elected. Didn't have any voting rights, but I went anyway. What I've done is, the cuts have been pretty disgraceful, but I focused a lot of my time on trying to make sure that the cuts do not happen, and I've been pretty active politically in campaigning against the election of an Abbott government. That would be a disaster for the education sector. And here at ANU, I've been trying to raise awareness within my own networks about what's going to happen to your education if the Liberal government is elected. So, yeah.
I suppose the stuff I've already gone over the EAG stuff. Basically, started up with a bunch of other people about the middle of this year. This thing called EAG is paralleling a think tank with a bunch of other universities, like all the New South Wales universities, some of the Victorian ones, where things called education action groups have arisen. Because of certain benefits that can be seen in having like an independent group of students who are also focusing on education activism in perhaps ways that the Student Association of various universities are not. Of course, like responding to those particular things is like real complex, I'm not going to. But I suppose, yeah, we've done like a number of projects. We've also like set out a bunch of sort of long-term strategy things that we're working towards. As regards last year, I mean, I tried to do a bunch of stuff with the education committee of the day. It was pretty inactive. I'm real sorry, Tom, that you have to hear that, but just not much happened. And I suppose like, yeah, like I tried to argue for stuff to go ahead, but like, I just was a real trucking and an angry dude, and like found it really difficult to make friends who actually wanted to be in a room and so talking to people was really hard. That's changed. I'm a lovely guy now. Yeah, I mean, I suppose one of the interesting things about last year was that the experience was of constantly being stonewalled maybe by people who just like weren't necessarily intentionally doing so, but their actions were taking place. And then sort of like realising that you have to figure out ways to work on it was also awesome.
So this is when I get to talk about Laura. So Laura actually didn't come to the debate today, something that I'm sure is going to affect whether she gets elected or not, because she's actually doing current job for ANUSA as a science faculty rep. So she's meeting up with the current course representatives to standardise how it's done. So I mean, that's how passionate she is. As I mentioned, she is a current representative as a science faculty rep. So she's been really involved, particularly obviously with science, and knows really well what the goals are with ANUSA. She's been involved a little bit with EAG, and she's even helped kind of, I guess, bring them a bit more into ANUSA. So for instance, they had the Science Week, handing out flyers for the rally they had that day. So getting that collaboration is something that we talk a lot about as a ticket. She even she babysits Marnie's kid. That's how much she's in all of this. I think she's probably going to have to quit that if she gets elected for conflict of interest. But she's been joking about putting thoughts in the little kid's mind. So yeah, Laura is exceptional, has done a whole lot, and just cares about it.
Ellen, this is your coordinating, or do you want to just stand up and yell?
So this is just for Cam specifically. Rumour has it that you once had sex in the Woroni offices. What is the likelihood that you will have sex in the ANUSA boardroom if you were to next year?
I'm being filmed right now.
Yeah, 1 to 10, just a number. It's fine.
1 to 10. I can confirm that I've never had sexual relations in the Woroni office. I'll leave that to probably not likely, knowing my own chances.
3, Dixon? I don't know.
Yeah, okay. I'll take it.
Yeah, we can take it.
Thanks.
President Cam Wilson this week said there was a 3% chance.
Do you have any other questions for the crowd? Yeah, Ellen?
Really basic one. I should declare my affiliation right now. As General Secretary, obviously it's my job to look after the Constitution. I was just wondering, what do you think, how would you describe your role as Education Officer, or Laura, as Education Officer, particularly considering the Constitution?
I think this actually leads on to another question that we have been asked, which is, yeah, no, it's very similar. But the Education Officer actually, traditionally, it sits in a constitutional quagmire. So it is both accountable to the ANUSA Executive and Education Committee. The question that we were asked, which is on the same issue, how will you navigate this dual responsibility, particularly in a situation where the Education Committee and ANUSA Executive are at loggerheads over a particular issue?
Yeah, okay. I suppose, like, if I really wanted to be a real stickler for the rules, I could say that the Education Committee doesn't ever actually have to be called at all under any circumstances. But, leaving that aside, I suppose if there was something that the Education Committee had voted upon in the meetings, and this was just totally rejected by the SRC and the ANUSA Executive, I would be first off very concerned because that really shouldn't be happening. But I suppose if it came down to it, I'd also be saying that in reality the people who have attended the Education Committee this year have also been people on the EAG. If the things the Education Committee wants to do are being continually rejected by the ANU SRC, then I would just say, man, just go and do it. But you just can't do it as the Education Committee. And I think that's one of the strengths of having these two parallel organisations, is that if there are problems for some reason, if the SRC is not just like politically against it. But if they're bound up, for instance, with some sort of in-camera comments that they've had to not tell everybody about, they can't act in certain ways, then there are actually now, as of this year, other very well-structured formal organisations that can allow you to act in different ways.
Okay, this is a good question for me, being as I won't be in the education, I've been the executive. Yeah, so I think, look, really, something that we've been focusing on as a ticket is this idea of consultation. And that's one of the main reasons I see for the Education Committee. Amy's done a great job this year of going to the Education Committee, giving them information that she has, and then talking, discussing, trying to find ways of action through that, and seeing their reactions that she can't just get on her own. I think that's a really big benefit of it, so finding out that information. As for the conflict between, I think, like, honestly, it's one of the most important things. It's a source of information. It can act on its own, but as well, it's a source of information for the rest of the executive. And so I don't see many positions when it's going to be diametrically opposed, because it's just the student interest, which we should be listening to.
Constitutionally, I think that over day-to-day education policy, I think the education officer has a fair amount of autonomy about what they do in terms of issues that are raised in the education committee, and that comes conflict with what the SRC wants. For all students, there's a lot of common ground. I think that is a very unlikely situation, but if there is conflict, it's all about trying to find where priorities do align and where you can make the best out of the situation. It would be a very difficult position for an education officer to be placed in, being constitutionally bound to both sections. I think Amy's handled it very well this year. I'd like to think that the Education Committee would come along to SRC and there could be a very robust discussion about policy and what could happen there. But I think you need to open forums for discussion in this type of area.
Do you have any more questions from the panel?
Sorry, really quickly, just to also emphasise that, like, if there's a situation where the Education Committee and the current executive of ANUSA simply cannot agree on something about education policy or about how to react to a certain statement put out by the university or the federal government or whatever, any organisation, and like, the problem is not that they are at loggerheads, the problem is that they can't agree. You know, like it's not the fact that they're caught up against each other and the education officer is caught in the middle. It's that we have two separate organisations that are both in ANUSA and they are fighting against each other, and that needs to be solved before this happens. Like that kind of a thing, you know?
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions from that?
Right, so the education officer also chairs and runs the mental health committee. I was wondering if you guys had any policies or ways you were looking at running the committee and engaging with students.
Yeah, I think that's a really important area of the education. I think it's a really good idea linking mental health with education policy, because while we're at university, a lot of the stresses and strains we cause in our lives are to do with our studies, to do with how we're allocating time to everything. I think that it is really good linking the two. In regards to initiatives and policies, I think universal lunch hour is placed particularly well for any awareness about mental illness, and that's what I think needs to happen in that area. So yeah, I think in terms of ideas and how to get the awareness out there, I think that going to students and talking to them, I think there are a lot of active campaigns already at the university, and strengthening them will bring about a lot of good.
I suppose if I was chairing such a committee, I'd also be emphasising about and chairing it, not it. so I suppose I also be starting with the groups that are probably most likely to suffer mental, like, I suppose, bad mental health. I don't know how to phrase it. Which is probably the collectors in many ways. With which I have like a number of connections, and I have a lot of friends in the disability department, the women's department. I know lots of women who are necessarily in the department, but I suppose my point is that, as chair, the role is to bring people into it. And I will start with collectors, I suppose, as both centralised organisations that have people you can talk to, and you can disseminate some information through them to a bunch of other people who probably going to read it. And then I suppose if there's no result from that, or if there's perceived to be like some sort of other set of interests that are not represented in the community, also identifying those interests and grasping at them where they come from.
Okay, sure. So I'm really passionate about mental health. I think ANUSA's they made it focus this year and they've done a really great job. So, I mean, most of us know about the mental health guide, they're doing great work on it. One thing I want to point out that I think a lot of people don't know about is Alex ran an amazing mental health roundtable at the start of this term with a lot of people from around the university to discuss a lot of the issues due with students. And from there, she developed a working group that's going to keep working and being involved in the future. I think she's done what we want to do in a lot of areas and keep doing, which is finding those connections in the university. Not saying that ANUSA has to do everything, but collaborating where we have areas that overlap, which is a lot, and getting a good result. So I'm really excited about that. We've got a great mental health policy, and we're just going to keep promoting that.
Alright, and then the last question for today is, we've had it for a long time, and I thank you for your patience, but education is an incredibly important issue while we're here. Right, this is a scenario question put by Amy McKinnon, our current education officer. Fabulous. Sorry, I'm having an outing. Right, it's Sunday night, and the NUS education officer, or president in Cam's case, calls you to notify you of a SNAP National Day of Action, to be held in 10 days' time in response to higher education cuts announced 2 days before. What do you do? What do you plan? Who do you contact? 30 seconds or less, go. Cam.
So, who do you plan? What do you plan?
What do you do? What do you plan? Who do you contact? So you've got 30 seconds.
Wait, what was the third one?
What do you plan? What do you do? Who do you contact? What are you?
Okay, so you contact the groups which, like I said, around campus who have similar involved things, education, you get people involved in that, the learning communities, etc. Obviously you use social media to great effect. I wanted to see more use of the NUS delegates around ANU campus actually help out with these things. If you're a delegate, why don't you come and help more out with what ANU is actually doing? That's it.
Right, go.
I suppose I'd notify the rest of the executive. I'd also notify anybody that I was closing, probably members of the EAG who could be relied upon to actually turn up to plan me over the next 100 days. I'd also be looking at contacting once again NUS delegates to try and get some sort of idea of what the circumstances around this are and then doing
First, getting my hands on the detail of what's happening and formulating an appropriate plan out of that, and then Facebooking everywhere, everything I can find. Getting in touch with networks such as NUS delegates, people who are known activists, the Education Action Group, the Education Committee, people who have even given a little bit of an inkling that they are interested in education. You let them know and you tell them to spread the word if it's really that simple.
Alright, well done. Alright guys, that kind of rounds up. But if you've got any pressing questions, I'm sure the candidates will be happy to answer them afterwards. Thank you for being patient and coming to actually really get involved in education. I hope that there are less people wearing t-shirts here than more, but I'm really glad you all came. Alright, thank you. This has been the ANUSA Education Debate provided by your ANU student media organisation, Woroni. Enjoy.
Also, still more beer.
We bought a bunch of beer, so...
Oh, really?
Oh,
really?
yeah, beer on half Woroni. Enjoy.